What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with episode 72 of Dynasty Decisions. We're in a great mood. Danny's division rival Eagles lost the Super Bowl last night as we're recording this. Your boy took down a $3,300 FanDuel bet on a $25 wager. So we're in a great spot right now. You guys know what these videos are about. We've explained them a million times. You submit your teams. We give you advice, trade advice, rookie pick advice. You know the drill. If you want to submit your teams for future episodes, our patrons get first priority. All submissions are coming now via our email, which is linked down below in the description. Like I said, if you are a patron, specify that you are one so you can skip the line. We will tally up a bunch of free submissions and get through those as quickly as we can. But before we get into it, as always, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, I'll tell you what, man, obviously it would be better experiencing your team win a Super Bowl, but I'll tell you what, a close second is just watching your bitter rival lose in the fashion the Eagles did last night. That was fantastic. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. And like I told you before we started recording, if the Cowboys had lost in that way, you would be fuming on camera right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you said, it's a division rival. You don't mind them losing on a bad holding call.
Yeah, for sure. But either way, we got to get back to these DDs, 16 submissions for the next couple days. So if you guys enjoy, make sure you leave that like down below. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers as always, trying to hit that before the NFL draft. But if you're enjoying the content, you're not already subscribed, hit that button, notification bell, all of that fun stuff. Before we get into the first team, though, as always, okay, at the intro.
All right, so the first submission is coming from Luca's team. I believe every team in this video will be patron submissions. So again, if you've submitted a free team, we will get to you as fast as we possibly can. But there's probably like 10 to 15 teams in the queue right now. And the quickest way to skip it is going over to Patreon and signing up. But Lucas says, what's up, boys? Just bought an orphan and wanted to get a little advice on how to get this thing going in the right direction. We always love tackling some orphans over here. Team isn't that bad, but it went 5-9 last year. Does not have the depth to compete quite yet. He said, feels like I should probably trade Burrow and upgrade depth at wide receiver and definitely tight end. It is a one quarterback league, tight end premium. And he lists the scoring format here. He says any advice would be appreciated. So you guys can see the team, Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Again, in a one quarterback league, I understand where he's coming from. Trading off a guy like Joe Burrow, you can still get some good value even in a one quarterback format. Travis Etienne and some, zero RB type of dudes after him. DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, and not a ton else there at wide receiver. Logan Thomas mainly as his only tight end there. In 2023, he has the 103, the 109, 203, and 209, and then all of his future picks in 2024. So I've seen way worse orphans than this one for sure. So what are your thoughts on this team?
Obviously a very solid team. You kind of mentioned right now in a one quarterback league, you do have Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, two, very, very awesome options, if you will, two top 5 level options. So you're clearly set there. I would agree with your assessment that you don't quite have the depth to fully compete right now, but looking at the selection of picks you have, looking at the depth on the team, I do think that there's a couple of transition moves that you could make. And you kind of mentioned here, maybe selling Burrow high, trying to get, whether that's an upgrade, whether that's an added piece, maybe downgrading at your quarterback 2 spot. I would agree with that evaluation. Like if you can get down to, even like Dak Prescott range from Joe Burrow, even if you want to go cheaper than that, you want to go for like a Daniel Jones type, like so be it. If you want to do, Joe Burrow 103 for Daniel Jones plus maybe, a stud wide receiver, that's probably where I would look. Like maybe you can get, CeeDee Lamb and Daniel Jones for 103 and Joe Burrow.
Yeah, in a one quarterback format, Joe Burrow is still a top 3 to 4 round startup pick, even in one quarterback league. So you should be able to go after, even if it's a 1-for-1 trade, somebody wants to trade you, I don't know, maybe T. Higgins. They're worried about the contract situation. They could trade you T. Higgins for Joe Burrow straight up. Maybe you have to throw in a pick to get that done, your 209 or something like that. You're in a good spot with having 2 elite quarterbacks. Even though it's a one quarterback format, you're still going to have a good amount of trade value and liquidity there because of the longevity of that position. With Travis Etienne, he doesn't really fit your team, but to me, he's a guy that I'm holding because I think his value is going to increase once the season begins because, the Jaguars are going to be everybody's, sleeper pick for the Super Bowl. Trevor Lawrence took a great step last year. Travis Etienne's going to be on this great offense with Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk and potentially Evan Ingram if they bring him back. So to me, I'm probably holding him for the time being unless somebody offers you some great stuff for him. And then your picks too. I mean, 103, you're probably looking at a wide receiver with that pick, and you need wide receiver depth. So that makes sense. You probably get your potentially number one receiver and a one quarterback. Maybe it's Bijan Gibbs, first 2 picks off the board, and you have Addison, JSN, whoever sitting for you at 103.
By the way, when I mentioned 103 earlier, I meant to say 109 or 203, slip of the tongue. But either way, like Joe, that would be the move I would be making, is if seeing if you can get, Joe Burrow plus the 109 or the 203, trying to get an established wide receiver. Because I do think if you can get, a CeeDee Lamb type, maybe a Garrett Wilson type added to this team, you still have, some upside at your quarterback 2 spot, but you get that stud wide receiver while still having that fluidity of using that 103, whether you want to use another wide receiver, trade it for another established option. You mentioned T. Higgins. That's a really good fit. If you wanted to send, 103 for T. Higgins, I think that should be able to get it done in majority of leagues. I think you can turn this around, especially within the next couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. And those later picks, the 109 is not extremely valuable in a one quarterback format, in a tight end premium as well. Michael Mayer should be off the board. If he's not, I think he would be an awesome fit for your. I would also inquire about potentially moving up to secure Michael Mayer, because with 109, maybe all it costs you is the 209 to get up to 107. And you might have a chance at Michael Mayer there, or if at the worst case scenario, maybe one of the top 3 wide receivers falls to you at that point. So to me, the 109 is a little bit of a dead zone in one quarterback format. So I would try and move up or trade it away for like a 2024 first or something like that, if you can get that done. So a lot of flexibility still. Like I said, I've seen orphans in much, much worse shape than this one is in. So I don't think you actually have too much work to do. I also don't mind the idea of taking Joe Burrow, like Danny said, going after a younger quarterback, maybe like Trey Lance, and a wide receiver is something that you can pull off there, just to mitigate some of the high-end value that Joe Burrow's realistically never going to see your lineup as long as you have Josh Allen. I guess theoretically, in an ideal world, you could stream matchups between those 2 guys, but that would only be in a way that you have this elite roster that there's like no other weaknesses on. To me, I would probably capitalize on Joe Burrow's value, like you kind of mentioned in your question. So we could probably move on to the next team here. We have Anthony's team here, who is also a patron. He said he sent us a message in Patreon, but here's his team. Again, all of our submissions going forward will be looked at via email. So appreciate all of you guys for sending them Discord, Twitter the last couple of years. But for us, for organization purposes, is way easier. And the email is down below in the description. He said, what action should he take in the near future? He thought he had a championship team, but all the injuries derailed him. Guys like Trey Lance, Javonte Williams, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Rashad Bateman, and Kyler Murray. He said he's looking to try and win this year. You guys can see the team on the screen there. Kyler Murray, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson as his main quarterbacks, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyler Algier, and some other guys. T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jamison Williams, Rashad Bateman, mainly at wide receiver. Mark Andrews as his top tight end. He has 3 ones this year, all in the mid to late range, 106, 109, 110, 205, and 306. Does not have his 2024 first-round pick. And he also listed that he made a trade for Javonte Williams involving the 110 in 2023 during the playoffs. To me, I think you may have sold a little low on Javonte Williams. He had on his team, and he sold him away for the 110. So let's tackle that trade first, and then we'll get through the rest of the team. It is a super flex league for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, you did sell a little bit low there, but I mean, you still have liquidity with that 110. You still have the availability to, use that, whether you want to trade up for maybe a quarterback in this spot. And I think that would be the man transition. Like you said, you want to try to compete with this team. You have an advantage at tight end with Mark Andrews. You have T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jamison Williams, Rashad Bateman. A ton of depth, a ton of youth at wide receiver. And you do have a couple win now type of running backs with some adequate depth. I do think the one spot that you got to figure out this year, if you're trying to compete, would be the quarterback. And the move that I'm looking to move or make personally is seeing if, maybe it's Trey Lance in 106 or Trey Lance in 109 plus 205, and seeing if you can get up to Lamar Jackson. I think that would make a ton of sense for you. It's kind of tough. You're in a bind right now because of the Kyler Murray status, but I do think maybe, you trade for a cheap quarterback to get you by for the first couple weeks, Ryan Tannehill type, some type of move that you can make earlier on in the offseason. Earlier on prior to the NFL season to make that move. So again, if that's Tannehill, similar to like what Marcus Mariota represented this year, where you got a cheap starting quarterback for maybe, a 3rd round pick or something like that. If you can, pay a 2nd round pick next year to go out and get Ryan Tannehill to get you by while Kyle Murray's coming back from injury, I think once Kyler comes back, you'll have a quarterback group of like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray with Ryan Tannehill as that adequate depth. Given your advantages at the other positions, I do agree with your assessment that you could potentially compete.
Yeah, and maybe even a 2024 second gets you to a better quarterback. Maybe the person who's trying to rebuild their team and tear it down has Daniel Jones on their roster, Jared Goff on their roster, Derek Carr on their roster, somebody like that. And even though they might be worth a little bit more than a 2024
Couple,
second in a
couple
super flex
seconds.
format, they might be just willing to sell off on that guy because they're trying to rebuild. We see that all the time with like middling type of assets. People that are trying to tear it down and rebuild don't always search for the best deal possible to kind of take the first thing that gets offered to them for those type of guys. So yeah, going after like a Jared Goff or somebody that's going to give you decent production would also make some sense. I totally agree with Danny's assessment. I would mitigate the risk of Trey Lance, get him off my roster, and get a much more established quarterback, in my opinion, because Trey Lance himself, this could work out for you where Trey Lance becomes, a great quarterback for dynasty purposes. But to me, that you have picks in the like lower range of the rookie draft, it makes sense to use Trey Lance and those picks to go up and get a better quarterback that's not going to have as much risk behind their name as Trey Lance would.
Well, this is the biggest sometimes between being that true contender that you're trying to be versus accumulating value, right? When you're accumulating value, when you're not really fully at risk of, I have to get wins this year, you can take chances on a guy like Trey Lance. When you are absolutely locked in, I want to win. This is a top 4 team. I have a chance to go win that pool. Sometimes you have to maybe even a little bit overpay just to make sure that you are in a spot for success the year before. Because if you go in with this year and you don't finish, at least in the semifinals, at least potentially in the championship, then that year has already been wasted for you, right? So taking a chance and it backfiring on you is much more steep of a cost than just slightly overpaying to get that, top end level production that Lamar Jackson can give you in this lineup that already has Mark Andrews, that already has, difference makers at receiver, Jonathan Taylor when he's healthy. Like you have guys that can win you leagues as long as your quarterback spot doesn't let you down in 2023.
Yeah, maybe you even have to go a little bit cheaper than Lamar Jackson. Maybe you have to go after Watson or Dak or somebody like that. Maybe you don't pay quite as much. Maybe it's Trey Lance in the 110 for Dak Prescott or something like that, just to have yourself a secure, locked and loaded quarterback. So I would say, I mean, you're relatively in a good spot, but you're going to have to make some moves and some adjustments at the quarterback position mainly. I think if you did nothing at running back, wide receiver, and tight end, you'd probably be fine to go into this season and compete. You're 106, 109, 110, and 205. Probably just, again, best player available as always. You could probably get another running back to your core, maybe another wide receiver in there. If you get one of those top receivers fall into you at 106, that makes sense. If you don't make a move at quarterback, you may have a quarterback fall to you at 106, like Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. But to me, those guys are not good enough prospects for me to just bank on that being like my, quarterback plan. Like I'm going to solve my quarterback position by just drafting Will Levis at 106. To me, I would much rather do what we said at the beginning of this, where we go after somebody a little bit more established. So we could probably move on to the next team here from Daniel K. Said, "What's up, fellas?" He always says this. I submit a lot of teams, so he really appreciates us reviewing them. He said he submit this team in before a while ago, and he said he's in good shape, but he also feels like he's in weird limbo of staying young, but also trying to compete. He said, "Would you say that this is kind of house money this year, and then spend the 2024 draft capital try and compete?" He said he's trying to stay patient, but the bottom two of all 4 of his dynasty teams this year. So he's got a lot of dynasty teams that are like really not doing well and in the low part of things. So he kind of wants some ROI to come out of his dynasty leagues. And he basically says some honest opinions on his trades as well. And he sent in a later trade that he made recently. So let's look at the team first, and then we'll get into some of his other stuff here. So the team here, 12-team Dynasty Superflex, full PPR. Josh Allen and Dak Prescott as his top quarterbacks. Javonte is his main running back there, and nobody really else to speak of. Wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Smith, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, Sky Moore, etc. And then pretty much young tight ends there, Cole Kmet, Mike Gesicki, K. Dot, and Brevin Jordan. He has the 106, the 103, the 111, the 112, the 302 this year, and then it looks like 4 2024 first and an extra 2025 first as well, but he does not have his 2024 second. So, I mean, pretty good shell, right? Like he's got a good wide receiver core, 2 stud quarterbacks, 1 running back that should accumulate value once he's, fully healthy from his ACL tear, and some upside at tight end. I don't think you're in really a bad shape at all. He said for his 2023 draft capital, should he stick and pick or re-roll in 2024? He said if he sticks and picks, who should he go after or just take best available? Obviously, we always take best available, but for your team specifically, 103, he said Stroud or Gibbs, and then I'll let you answer that. And then JSN or Addison at 106. Like, I guess those are the guys he's kind of caught between.
So 103, who are the options? Stroud or Gibbs?
Stroud or Gibbs? To me, I think I would go Stroud just given
Yeah,
that I think Stroud is going to have more startup value. And even though
agreed.
you don't necessarily need Stroud because you have Allen and Prescott already, you could always move off of Prescott given that you're in a more of a rebuilding type of window. Go with the younger quarterback, maybe get yourself another stud receiver, or maybe you can go after Kyle Pitts or something with Dak Prescott. I think that would make a ton of sense in my opinion. I'm always going with who's going to have more startup value and who do I believe in more long term. To me, as much as Gibbs is a great prospect, and we did a film review in our Discord for him the other day, I think Stroud is just the better pick there at 103. And then as far as JSN and Addison, I mean, it's personal preference. Whoever you like more, whoever gets better draft capital, whoever goes to the better landing spot. To me, they're like neck and neck. I would rather pick Addison as of right now, just because I think he's the better prospect. But for the most part, it's pretty close.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. He does have a couple potential offers on the table that you could go through as well. 103 mid late 2024 first and the 2024 third for Jamar Chase. Very, very solid deal. I think that's definitely one that you should consider. It looks like he already made the Ezekiel Elliott, Dalton Schultz deal because I do see 111 and 302 listed. I like the value that you got on that side. So he mentions these deals. Obviously, the Jamar Chase one I just said. Another one he has here, potentially John Mechie in the 103 for T. Higgins, as well as a couple that he said he just got in today. So the first one, I mean, they all are involving the 103, but the first one that he got today, 103, 112, and 302 for Tyreek Hill in an early 2024 first. I'm assuming that means a top 4 level designation, or the 103 for an early to mid 2024 first, 2025 second, and Kadarius Toney. So right off the bat, out of the trades that you got today, I mean, the Tyreek Hill trade is much, much better than the second trade with Toney the second and the early to mid first, because you're basically getting a top 5 level wide receiver in production this year, which you said you mentioned you want to potentially get some ROI, as well as an early 2024 first. So basically, for E's sake, the 103 and the early 2024 first, for the most part, kind of cancel each other out. So if you're looking at, making a contending type of move and only really having to pay the 112 and the 302 to go get a guy like Tyreek Hill, I think I would take that trade.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not looking to make a contending type of move, I think you could probably just flip Tyreek Hill for more than you're paying.
Yeah,
If you
I agree.
just if you're like, oh, okay, I love Tyreek Hill and I maybe could contend if things break right, but you could also just be like, I'm winning this trade. I'm going to take Tyreek Hill and sell him for 120% of what I just got in this trade, and maybe somebody offers you a young receiver of equivalent value for Tyreek Hill, and you can continue your rebuilding window, or maybe a young running back of equivalent value. Somebody's willing to give you like Brees Hall or something like that. Or Kyle Pitts and something for a guy like Tyreek Hill would also make some sense. So I think I would just make this trade simply by the fact that it's a good offer and you're going to win the move value wise.
100%. And agreed. Like, you go into the season and Tyreek Hill's averaging 22 PPR points per game. Like, you're going to get an offer of maybe even a couple 2024 firsts at that point. And you mentioned you already have, what is that, 4 2024 firsts. You would add a fifth because you would get this guy's early 2024 first, which I don't know why he's, just willingly giving you that. But I mean, so be it. Maybe he's attacking a quarterback because he's got like, you have Jarrett Stidham, but I mean, like guys like that, like Brock Purdy or Cooper Rush or stuff like that. Like that's his quarterback core, and he wants to go get CJ Stroud. So be it. But if he's giving you that early 2024 first, you can get your 5 stack there. And like we said, maybe Tyreek Hill gets you more draft capital, or maybe he's producing and you're willing to, keep him into your 2024 competing window where point blank simple, 5 2024 first should be able to net you a pretty fucking solid running back core and a great running back class for next year. So you add, maybe a running back or two from that selection of picks that you'll have. You have Javonte Williams already. You have really good competing quarterbacks. I think you can turn this into a dynasty level team, like absolute top of your league type of team, if you're able to add those, stud factor at running back, maybe another tight end added. You already have your quarterbacks and wide receivers figured out. So, I mean, this team could dominate your league within, by 2024.
Yeah, and another move that I just thought of, because you have Prescott, and like I said, you could really milk this thing and make this a dominant team. You could sell Dak and Tyreek, 2 very good competing pieces, to one team, if they have like the itchy trigger finger and they're like, I want to compete now, even though they're not quite ready. You can get their 2024 first, maybe some young pieces. He mentions here some team has like Trevor Lawrence, ETN, Olave, and Pitts in a 2024 first. If he offered you like Olave, Pitts in the first for Dak Prescott, Tyreek Hill, and another competing piece, you might actually be able to get that done. And that would be way more beneficial for your winning window in that type of situation. So I think kind of the centering theme here is that you have a lot of options. He says, should I sell Josh Allen? Again, when you sell Josh Allen, you better get a shit ton in return. And I think you made a great trade getting him. Watson, Dotson, and the 109, easy money. Josh Allen, give me that easily. But he says the guy that I want to sell Josh Allen to has Trevor Lawrence, Etienne, Olave, Pitts, and a 2024 first. Out of those pieces, what would it take for you to move off of Josh Allen? Trevor Lawrence and Pitts enough for you to move off of Josh Allen?
No.
Trevor Lawrence in the potentially early first. He says he's one of the bottom 5 teams.
I would see maybe if you can do, maybe you add, another piece on top, whether that's like I mean, if we're looking
The
here,
111 or the 112 this year or something, maybe.
yeah, even like the 106, if you can get T-Law, Pitts in the first, or T-Law, Olave the first, and maybe another piece, like I think that would be probably relatively fair.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at when we're moving Josh Allen. We ain't moving Josh Allen just for the sake of moving him because he's worth that much. So I would say for you, unless he's going to give you a shit ton of stuff, I probably wouldn't move Josh. If his best offer is like, I'll give you Trevor Lawrence and a first, and even then, I think he'd probably be hesitant. He'd probably want like a second back or something like that. There's no way I'm moving Josh Allen for that, as good as Trevor Lawrence is. So I think that I would probably hold Josh Allen unless you can get an absolute godfather. But you're in a great spot, man. Like you have very, very flexible assets here. A stud wide receiver core that ain't going anywhere anytime soon. They're all like 24 years old or less, pretty much, except for Metcalf, who's like 25. So you're in a good spot. You can spend some of your picks this year, add to your options there. And like you said at the beginning of the question, just play with house money and spend your picks in 2024 and be ready to compete at that point in time. So we can move on to the next team here, which is from Corb's team. It is, he has his team listed here. It's, he says a new subscriber, loving the content. Always appreciate that. He said he's looking to win this year, or this year coming up. He said he made the playoffs in 2022 and lost in the first round, but he had a very good chance to win the championship. He said he's mainly looking at trades that would make him a little bit younger, but also help him to win it all this year. And this is kind of an interesting concept in Dynasty because most of the time you don't want to sacrifice your winning window if you're in this situation. And also, you still want to stay competitive. You don't want to just trade Devontae Adams for like nothing because then you're not competitive anymore. You want to try and get younger at that position, for example. And then he said it's only an 8-team league, but highly competitive. It is a 2-quarterback league, PPR, only a 3-round rookie draft. He said, yeah, I mean, we can see the team here. He has Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, pretty damn good quarterback core there. Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, Damian Pierce, A.J. Dillon, and Elijah Mitchell. Very deep at running back. Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk, Hollywood Brown, and some other guys there. Kyle Pitts, Dalton Schultz, Mike Gesicki at tight end. Has the 101 somehow in this class, given the team that he has here. 106, 206, and 208 as well. All of his picks in 2024 plus an extra second. All of his picks in 2025. So I would say, I mean, right off the top, there's really nothing that you need to do because your team is already well set up for the now and for the future.
Yeah, the moves that I would say though that stick out like sore thumbs are, you mentioned you want to get a little younger. Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, off my team, like genuinely. I'm assuming
here's the thing though, like if you can't get good value for those guys, you have
in an 8-team league
influx of youth.
In an 8-team league, I'm assuming that you're going to get some pretty good value for those guys, to be honest, because you're going to get it, especially too if you decide to make that move in season. You're going to get offers like from teams that want to compete, realize that it's an 8-team window, realize that they need that superstar talent to be able to win the championship. I'd be willing to deal them, especially given, the longevity factor that those guys simply don't have. Because, I mean, you have Josh Allen, you have Kyler Murray, you have, some young wide receivers accompanying them, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, et cetera, there, Kyle Pitts, not to mention, like, if you pick Bijan Robinson at 101, you're going to have still a framework, especially at running back. You're going to have more than adequate depth at running back to be able to make that transition type of move. So that's what I'd be looking at there. You mentioned some of these potential trades, maybe the 102 for a 106 plus a mid-second, 2024 mid-second, whether that's, 204, 205, 206, so be it the next year. I'd be willing to make that move up to 102 if I need to be honest, because, I mean, you're going to be dealing without Kyler Murray, and if you're wanting to compete, you're kind of dealing with some issues there. And not to mention, if I have the 102 and I can attach it to, Purdy or Geno Smith or something like that, I'm kind of seeing what, people are going to be willing to buy it for. And I'm assuming it's going to be a payment worth more than the 106 in a mid-second.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you just have to, add Bryce to your team, like obviously he's going to help you out as well. He also says some other potential trades, AJ Brown, Purdy plus something to get to AJ Brown.
Yes.
What would you be willing to give up? Because he said he has Lance on his team, so he's probably inclined to go after Purdy as like that, double condom safety play. So if you have to give up like 106 and Purdy, do you think that gets it done for AJ Brown? Or you think you probably have to throw in one of your twos as well?
I'd throw in a 2 if I have to. Yeah, go get that done.
106, 206, and Brock Purdy for AJ Brown. I'm signed, sealed, delivered. I'm making that trade every day of the week. Same.
Yep.
He says Pittman. What would you be willing to give up to get Pittman? If he doesn't want to give up AJ Brown, would you be still willing to give up 106 and Purdy for Michael Pittman Jr.?
I wouldn't give up 106 for Michael Pittman.
No. Okay. So what kind of trade package would you fashion to get Michael Pittman?
Well, given that those twos would be earlier because it's an 8-man league, that would be the equivalent for like early twos. I'd be willing to give at least Purdy both twos, and maybe, he wants a Hunter Renfrow or something like that as wide receiver depth to replace that depth that he's losing. So if you can make that type of move, yeah, sign me up. But I would not pay a first in this format for Pittman personally.
Yeah, he also has an extra second in 2024 that might be it's not his by the looks of it. So it could be an early to mid second potentially. Maybe it's Purdy in an early to mid second gets you to Pittman, and maybe even if you throw the 208 in this year, I would probably be willing to do that as well. And then he also says DK Metcalf potentially on the table for Amari Cooper in a mid second. I personally would easily do that. DK Metcalf. As much as we were wrong about Amari Cooper this year, and I'm definitely going to take that on the chin, and he's probably a good win now asset to have with Watson coming back and probably playing better. I still think that I would probably try and sell high on him.
Absolutely. No, I would agree with you there. Overall, though, you're in a good spot. You have like plenty of transitions to be able to do. Like I kind of said, trying to gauge the value of those running backs. I'd also gauge the value of a guy like Dameon Pierce right now. I know he's going to get a ton of hype, but you still have the risk factor that they could take a running back in the draft. You know that people are going to be talking about that he got the volume this year, that he looked, good in spurts this year, and maybe whether that's transitioned into first round type of equity, whether that's transitioned to a safer wide receiver, or Dameon Pierce plus a couple seconds maybe to get you a safer wide receiver. I think that would be the type of move I would look for.
Yeah, he also says, too, just some quick notes on his rookie draft stuff. He says he's probably just going to take Bijan at 1, obviously, given your team situation. That's the right move. He said then looking to upgrade wide receiver with my picks unless he can't move up and get JSN. He's firmly of the camp. He's the best receiver in the class. That's fine. If you want to gauge the market and see how much it costs you to get up to 102, 103, 104 area, it is a super flex league. So we got to imagine quarterbacks are going to go off the board. You might even get him at 106. I don't think it's out of the range of outcomes there. He also said he's nervous with Kyler Murray. To me, I probably wouldn't be. Between Geno Smith, even if you just went into the season, Geno Smith, Josh Allen, I think he'd be just fine.
I agree. And I mean, like you said, you can kind of leverage Brock Purdy as well. So you'd have Josh Allen, Geno Smith, and then obviously when Kyler Murray comes back, which it's probably not going to be too much after week 5, week 6. I mean, we even saw Chris Godwin and Michael Gallup return earlier off of their ACLs, late season ACLs.
They're wide receivers too. Like quarterbacks, right? He's going to play with a brace the whole season, probably not run as much as he's usually used to running, but he should be fine. I mean, Joe Burrow literally made the Super Bowl after tearing his ACL. Yeah. So
different timing, I don't think to be fair, but yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a problem for Kyler Murray his first year back, but I don't think it's gonna be a huge hindrance. And I think Geno Smith is more than fine quarterback depth to be able to get by until he comes back. So I would say you're in a good spot. He also says his league overvalues youth too. So like Brock Purdy guys, Dameon Pierce, like Danny said, guys that are young and people are gonna imagine sunshine and rainbows about. I would say that those guys are good guys to shop on the market as well. And if your league overvalues youth, like I said, if nobody's giving you any value for Derrick Henry and nobody's giving you any value for Aaron Jones, I mean, you can keep them as running back depth, maybe move them mid-season, whatever the case is. For the time being, they're fine to just even keep on your team. I'm not totally inclined to move those guys if nobody's giving you anything.
For sure. But either way, I mean, I think we pretty much covered the team. You have a lot of transitions that you can make that can make this into an absolute monster. We'll try to speed these up a little bit. We'll go on to our 5th team, another patron from Skol. I'll let you take it away with the roster and potential questions that he'd be looking to transition with his team.
Yeah, he's got pretty much just one question: is can I compete in 2023? And Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith in his 1 quarterback league. It is a PPR format, so it's a 1 quarterback league. He doesn't have a great quarterback situation, but Cousins and Geno is fine in a 1 quarterback format. Swift, Dobbins, Pollard, Madison, Herbert, and Mitchell pretty deep at running back there. You should have a couple great options: Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, Cortland Sutton, Darnell Mooney, Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore. So other than Jefferson, you don't have a lot of high-end wide receivers, but you have some wide receiver 3 types that would definitely fill out your lineup. And then Mark Andrews as your main tight end there, also holding the 102 and 103 in a 1 quarterback league. Obviously, you're not going to get Bijan Robinson, but you should have a chance, at Gibbs, your top receiver, whoever it ends up being, Jordan Addison, JSN. You could grab 2 wide receivers. You could try and see what it costs to get up to 101. I would also definitely inquire about that, because if the manager of the 101 doesn't see a huge difference between Bijan and Gibbs for whatever reason, or really likes JSN for whatever reason, or Addison for whatever reason, and all it costs you is the 102 and Rashad Bateman and Khalil Herbert or something like that to get up to Bijan Robinson, I would definitely inquire about something like that.
Yeah, the other thing I'm doing is inquiring about CeeDee Lamb. I'm inquiring about AJ Brown. I'm inquiring about T. Higgins. I'm inquiring about, Amon or St. Brown. All of those type of players. Because yes, I love, Justin Jefferson. We love, the potential bounce back of Deontay Johnson, but there is a lot of risk with your wide receiver core if you want to compete in 2023. I would say even if you have to include, maybe Bateman in the 103 to get you a CeeDee Lamb, I would be willing to make that type of move, because I do think that getting an extra, established stud wide receiver, while you're still going to have risk with the rest of your core, but somebody that you compare with Justin Jefferson in your lineup that you can pretty much count on between them getting you around 40 to 45 PPR points per game, especially in a start 8, man. Like, I want that stud factor on my team. So I do think getting one extra stud there would help you out. 103 in Bateman or 103 in Sutton or Mooney or whatever you want to go for CeeDee Lamb. I think that's a proper move to make. I think you're pretty much set at running back for the most part with what you're trying to build if you want to compete. Obviously, there's risk there as well, but Pollard, Dobbins, Swift, you're expecting those guys to be, top 15 level guys if healthy. So I right now am absolutely not adding to the running back core, but maybe that's something you can look for in season if they just aren't getting it done. I think right now you're looking fine. Tight end, obviously, you have that advantage, and you kind of mentioned he's a little weaker at quarterback, but realistically, especially in a one quarterback league, like, it's kind of tough to get into that elite tier without overpaying. And personally, here, I just want to attack that wide receiver position for your team before I even worry about getting an upgrade at quarterback over Geno and Cousins, who on a week-to-week basis can fill in as top 12 to 14 level guys.
Yeah, I think taking a risk at quarterback might not be a terrible idea. Like,
Agreed.
if you're on the board at 203, like, he doesn't have any seconds by the looks of it, but if 203 is on the board and Anthony Richardson's still on the clock, you could trade Cortland Sutton potentially 1-for-1 for that pick and take a risk on Anthony Richardson, get yourself an an upside swing at quarterback behind the guys that you already have. Because if Anthony Richardson hits, obviously he's going to become one of those elite quarterbacks. That's going to be a great, one QB positional advantage, give you all the rushing that he can give you. So I would inquire about somebody like that. Maybe Trey Lance as well. If people are down on him in your league, you might be able to get him for second round caliber type of assets. Like, you have a bunch of them at wide receiver. So that'd be pretty easy transition to make as well. So I would say you're probably not very, very likely to compete in 2023. I think you're probably going to be like a playoff team, but not like an elite team, most likely, unless you can really hit big on 102 and 103 during the rookie draft. But for the most part, I think you're in a relatively good spot, because things can break right for you. If Deontay has a big bounce back, Elijah, Bateman, Pollard stays with the Cowboys or whatever, like, you could have a very good team next year. There's just a lot of risk factor here. And if you could offload some risk and get some more established pieces, like Danny was saying, I think that would probably make some sense for you as well. So let's move on to the next team here, which is from Cody, a 12-team super flex, half PPR, half tight end premium start 10 type of format as well. You guys can see his team on the screen there. Daniel Jones, Trey Lance, mainly Sam Howell, some other guys there at quarterback. Khalil Herbert, Kenneth Gainwell, Dearness Johnson, 0 RB guys at running back. Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver, and then Kyle Pitts, Greg Dulcich as his main tight ends. He also has the 102, the 103, the 107, the 201, the 202, and the 205 in this year's class. All of his picks in 2024 as well. Has some trades listed here as well and some other hypothetical situations. But overall, looking at the team, what do you think? And let's get into probably the trades. He said he was a playoff team that just lost Stafford and Bateman on IR, and he traded away some pieces to a contender. So kind of a retool in progress by the looks of it.
Yeah, no, it definitely looks good here. So you got, obviously, Daniel Jones is your main quarterback right now. Trey Lance is filling behind him. Kind of question marks at that spot. However, you do have the 102. You kind of asked here, thinking of flipping the 102 or 103 for a later first and a future first closer to draft time. I would be willing to do that with the 103, because I do think that, potentially by next year you could fill out that running back core. But I do think with this team at 102 that I'm just going to take Bryce Young. You get Bryce Young, you got Daniel Jones, you have Trey Lance. Obviously, still holds a little bit of risk in the quarterback core because you don't have like that true established option. But adding a guy like Bryce Young definitely mitigates a lot of the risks that you have, because Daniel Jones, still dealing with the contract talks. We don't exactly know about his longevity. Trey Lance, we haven't seen him start more than 2 NFL games. So getting a guy like Bryce Young added, who has that, potential security of being a top 2 NFL draft pick, potential upside of being, maybe the next, top 8 level startup pick by this time next year, I think would suit your roster. You have a couple trades listed here. I actually like your side on basically all these trades. 111 and Tyler Algier, you take the risk on Daniel Jones. It's probably, relative, market value for what Daniel Jones would go for. 4th, 5th round startup pick for Tyler Algier. He's probably going to find his way in the 9th, 10th round area. Plus, 111, which is Zay Flowers.
6th to 8th round, probably type
Right.
of value we're talking about.
So I think that's fair, but in your position, I don't mind taking the chance on a young quarterback like that. 207 Jimmy Garoppolo, you upgrade to the 107, easy move. And then finally, taking the chance on Rashad Bateman for McKenzie in the 302. Like, just give me the upside that Bateman has at that spot. Even if he doesn't pay off, man, you didn't lose anything in that deal.
Yeah, you traded a waiver wire ad in the 302 for him. So
Yeah.
you're definitely in a good spot there. The one thing I would say, because I actually do think you could turn this around relatively quickly, because you have a great tight end core, a great wide receiver core. If you hit on a quarterback early at 102, whether it's Bryce or another thing that I would experiment with is going after and seeing if 102 by itself is enough to get you Deshaun Watson or Kyler Murray, because it might be. If somebody wants to re-roll into a young quarterback, they might be willing to give you one of those 2 quarterbacks that I just mentioned, or maybe Herbert, because he's got some down value right now. Maybe you have to throw in one of your 2nd round picks to get that done or whatever. If you got one of those guys, let's say you trade 102 straight up for Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Trey Lance is your quarterback core. 103, you can get Jahmyr Gibbs with that pick. 107, you could probably get like a Charbonnet or whoever the 3rd running back off the board is with that pick. 201, 202, 205, you're firing darts at A-Chains and very deep running back class that we have this year. You're going to fire darts at running backs at that position. If you only drafted like a quarterback and a bunch of running backs with most of your picks, you'd probably be in like a house money year.
Yeah, to a degree, though I do think I agree with his assessment of trading down for a later first and then getting an extra future first, because hypothetically, if you can turn that 103 trade down, so let's just say you trade down to the 108 and get a 2024 first, you may be able to get another 2024 first for that 108. And if you're talking about, I have that potential upside of having 2 2024 firsts added, you kind of mentioned like he's got a really solid foundation. His receivers are all set. His tight ends are all set. You maybe mentioned, like you said, getting a Deshaun, Kyler, Dak type for that 102, so be it. You add that quarterback, you have upside. Even if you're not fully set, you have a stud quarterback 1. You have 2 guys with Daniel Jones and Trey Lance that could figure in. So you're pretty much set there. The only thing that you're missing here is that running back. And yeah, while you can get Jahmyr Gibbs this year, it's absolutely a good pick. If you could tell me you have 2 chances next year at being able to get, a combination of Sanders and Edwards, or a combination of, Corum and Braylon Allen, I would rather add 2 of the running back crop next year than solely focusing on a guy like Gibbs personally.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, too, is taking advantage of the depth of this class, because you have 3 second rounders in the early portion, too, because you can throw a bunch of 0 RB dart throws at 3rd round running backs. If, we get A-Chain 3rd round draft capital, Sean Tucker gets 3rd round draft capital, Zach Evans goes in the 3rd round. You can throw a bunch of darts at those type of dudes. And maybe by mid-season, you're like, hey, my guys are actually kind of performing, and maybe I can make a contending trade or something like that. So to me, you got a lot of flexibility, which is what we always want in Dynasty. So we can probably move on to the next team here, which is from AJ. Again, another patron submission. It is a 10-team PPR Superflex, 6 point per passing touchdowns. Pretty lethal duo of quarterbacks here with Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. Also have Sam Howell there in reserve and Matt Ryan. Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, Dameon Pierce is a 4-stack of running backs. Is pretty fierce. DK Metcalf, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Rashad Bateman, etc. at wide receiver. Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson at tight end. 106, 203, 403, and 503. All of his picks by the looks of it, except for his 2 and his 3 in 2024. Basically he said, what do I do? Honestly, might just tear it all down. So for me, I don't think that's probably the right assessment of this team. Wide receiver, like you could stand to have better options there for sure. Like Metcalf, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, and Tony and Bateman. Like they're not the greatest superstar caliber guys, but you're pretty strong at running back. You're pretty strong at QB, very strong at tight end. If you can flip TJ Hawkinson and maybe one of your running backs, or another one of these like middling wide receivers for a better wide receiver, I think that would be an easy transition for me to make.
The move that I'm looking for right now is whether it's Pearson the 106 or Pearson Hawkinson. I think, although we're lower on Hawkinson, I do think the market value is probably around a mid first 106, 108 type range
Maybe that might be a little high.
for
Late first,
most people,
probably.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe you go attacking tendenting. Maybe he's worth like the 108, 109 in the majority of leagues, right? So if you attach Pierce plus Hawkinson or Pierce plus the 106 and you go after like a stud wide receiver, like we're talking about, maybe you don't get to like Garrett Wilson area, but you have DK, but somebody in that type of range. If you can get like that,
Higgins.
Yeah, target somebody like that, even if you have to add the 2, so be it. You get a receiver like that. I think you can compete with this team. You have 2 really solid quarterbacks. Obviously, your quarterback 3 could be a potential sore spot, but Sam Howell's expected to get some starting snaps this year. So while you're not fully set, at least you have some potential transition moves you can make in season. Running backs, yeah, like right now going into the season, Hall, Dobbins, Jacobs have their question marks, especially with Hall's ACL. But I mean, by mid-season, at minimum by 2024, all those guys should be healthy, ready to work for you. And then on wide receiver, you just realistically need one guy added to this team because you had, like you kind of said, a Jalen Waddle. You have DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney. Like you have a lot of upside while they're not, maybe fully set. And then you have the gold standard himself, Kyle Pitts at tight end. So I think you're being a little bit harsh on yourself. That I don't know what I should do. Should I tear it down? Because I do think that a couple moves added to this team, a couple, stud wide receiver plus maybe another depth piece added to this team, I think you can compete. I think you can be a top 4 level team in your league.
Yeah, and I mean, Dotson and Pickens obviously have quite a bit of hype because they had pretty good rookie seasons too. If you wanted to turn those guys into more established dudes, you probably could get it done. I mean, if you took George Pickens in the 203, you might even be able, if somebody's really worried about the T. Higgins contract situation, you might be able to get the T. Higgins with 203 and George Pickens right now, given Pickens' market value. So yeah, I agree with Danny. I think you're being a little harsh on yourself. You're pretty well set up for at least a house money year this year as well.
Yep.
Once Breece Hall comes back, you should be, really well set up to be able to compete in this league. Like you said, 6 point per passing touchdown. You have 2 of the best, 8 passing quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, 100%. Like you have that positional advantage at quarterback. You have the positional advantage at tight end. You have really solid depth at wide receiver, maybe just adding one guy. And when your running backs are healthy, I mean, Breece Hall's a top 5 level guy. Jacobs, he's got some risk because he's a free agent, but no matter where he lands, should be able to get a workload. And then J.K. Dobbins is obviously your riskiest running back, but I mean, you have some upside at in the backup spot, right? If you move Dameon Pierce, like I kind of said, like you said, you can add, maybe a couple dart throws in the draft this year. So be it. You don't necessarily need to have numerous numbers of running back. You just kind of have to have some, potential transition options, like, maybe whatever that 203 gets you, or maybe 4th round, you take like a 6th round running back, stuff like that you can add that if they ever see, a value pocket where they get some playing time, can affect your lineup.
Yeah, and there's always going to be opportunities in season to trade for your Jeff Wilson, Cordero Patterson types if you need to as well. Running back, like if I'm competing in Dynasty, typically I want to have 3 established running backs and maybe like 1 or 2 zero RB guys behind them. And I think that's kind of like where you're at running back. And you also have the upside. If you don't trade the 203 away to add a Zach Evans, to add whoever you like, A-Chain or whoever it is, or even at 106, potentially, if we get Zach Charbonnet 2nd round draft capital to a great offense, you might be able to add somebody like him as well. Or maybe Gibbs gets a terrible landing spot, like the mock draft we broke down from Matt Miller, him going to the Detroit Lions. You'd be able to get Gibbs at 106 probably if that actually happens. So we could probably move on to the last team of the video, which is from Addison. Here, you guys can see the team on the screen. Quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Zach Wilson, etc. there. Running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, etc. there. Amari Cooper, Kadarius Toney. Not really a whole lot at wide receiver. And then Dallas Goedert is his main tight end. He does have quite a bit of draft capital in this year's class, 109, 110, 211, 212, 304, and then 3 picks in 2024 in the first round, 2nd rounder, 3rd rounder, and 2 4th rounders. So again, not like the greatest situation here because you're not very strong at wide receiver, pretty light at running back, but you do have 2 established quarterbacks. You do have a young established tight end. So overall, what's your assessment of this team? Kind of what direction would you go with the draft picks that you have? For me, I think the easy answer is that if you can transition your 2023 picks into more 2024 picks, that'd be a pretty easy move to make.
Absolutely transition your 2023s into 2024s, whether that's like paying the 109 and the 212 to get a random 2024 first, or the 110 and the 211 to pay or to get a random 2024 first. I think those are your best moves there. So straight off the bat, if you can get both those transition into 2024s, I think that's your best bet. You kind of mentioned what are you doing with the actual team itself? What are you doing with the roster itself? Those two quarterbacks are going to be your building blocks with Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. I'm not attached to a single other player. If you can get proper adequate value, especially in 2024 picks for a guy like Dallas Goedert, Mari Cooper, Kadarius Toney, J.K. Dobbins, Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, I'm selling them off for picks because I want to make sure that I get the 2024 101. And whether I take Caleb and potentially make a move at quarterback or sell Caleb for the King's ransom that he's going to net, we're talking about some trades that people are making for Bijan Robinson being in the area of 3 firsts. Caleb Williams next year is going to at least meet, if not surpass, what people are paying for Bijan Robinson next year. So I do think with the framework of your team, if you can eliminate some of those production pieces off your team, you can almost ensure yourself at the 101, especially if you get, let's just say this is stacked with 7 2024 firsts by the time that you sell everybody off. You're going to have an opportunity to fully make this into a monster by 2025. But as currently stands, I just don't think that your roster is quite ready enough to add some pieces to it to try to compete. I think you want to make sure that every single piece on your team is a piece that's not giving you production right now. And the best bet for that is going to be a 2024 first, maybe even 2025.
Yeah, and unfortunately, where your picks ended up, 109, 110, you're getting like kind of a value drop off just relative to where the class stacks up. Same goes for 211, 212, probably a value drop off there as well. One thing that I would definitely explore is, you know, we always talk about tanking your own pick in season to make sure that you get Caleb Williams. Another move that could be, you know, a very, very high value to you is if one of your quarterbacks is having like an MVP caliber season, monster fantasy performance, which is definitely possible from both Jackson and Watson because both of them have done it before. Maybe you can sell Lamar Jackson midseason, who's like 25 PPR point per game type of average, and you can sell him for CeeDee Lamb, who's on IR with a hamstring injury, and a 2025 first or something like that.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not, obviously, for Danny's sake, but maybe you can make moves like that during the season to get that production off your team, tank your own pick, get some more liquidity, maybe get yourself a stud receiver in the process.
Yeah, the only way I would accept like actual roster pieces on this team is if they're like under 23, 24, realistically. Like CeeDee Lamb would be like the cutoff because he'll be 24 next year. I am solely targeting youth and solely targeting draft capital because, to put it simply, like if you were to try to run it and try to compete with this team, it would be tough sledding for you.
Yeah, you have pretty much no wide receivers that are going to give you any production outside of Amari Cooper. You're hoping for like wide receiver fours at that point for the rest of your roster. So yeah, pretty far away, I would say, with this team. Don't be married to your quarterbacks. I think they're definitely building blocks for you, but if they're having
100%.
great seasons next year, you can get potentially, 3-4 first round caliber assets or something in return for those guys. I think that would definitely make some sense. As it currently stands, they're both like buy low, so you're not going to get that value until the season actually starts, most likely. But my goal in 2024 would be monopolize that class, secure Caleb Williams, secure Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, he would fit this team perfectly because you're very lacking at wide receiver. Maybe you can sell Dallas Goedert as well and add Brock Bowers to this team or something like that. You're, not in a great spot right now, but you could definitely be in a great spot in the future. So again, if you guys enjoyed this video, you guys know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Make sure you check out our Patreon. We have tons of content over there, right? We're doing film breakdowns in the Discord every Sunday at noon. So just because football is over now that the Super Bowl has taken place doesn't mean we are not going to still watch football and still talk football over here. And you can get access to our Discord over on Patreon. You'll also get access to our player cards, which have all of our scouting stuff on there. I'm breaking those down probably like 3 or 4 a week. And you can see what games I watched, how I grade the player, who my pro comparison for them is, their pros and cons, all that good stuff, how they relatively compare to previous draft classes. My historical grades database is over there on Patreon as well. You can get first dibs on videos like this, Dynasty Decisions, via the Patreon, our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0. Tons of content over there. Don't be shy. Go check it out. Go read the benefits and see if it's for you. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.
Wire me the money.